I'm here with Anthony and Rob, Dr. Rob. I just met Dr. Rob. We had a lovely chat because Anthony decided to show up a half an hour late.
Yeah, sorry, man.
No, it's okay. You're technically the star of the show.
Oh, give me a break. That's BS.
I mean, I feel like it is.
Bro.
I'm just a timekeeper. We are going to talk about cholesterol. Yeah. Get your hydration in. You can't lower your number now. So Anthony has ridiculously high cholesterol. Let's just cut to the chase.
I wouldn't say ridiculously high.
Well, what would be ridiculous? 100?
I think it's higher than normal. I'm sure if I took my
Crestor wants to sponsor you.
If I took my results to a standard family physician, I feel like I would be told I have high cholesterol and I should probably watch it and probably limit my meat consumption and cut out red meat and probably.
They would say you're going to have a heart attack today.
100%.
Really?
And they're going to be like,
that?
someone replaced all your blood with butter.
Jeez Louise.
I didn't think if you bled, it would just congeal as fat.
In comparing, and I'm comparing it to influencers in my space and people I've looked up to over the years and people I've followed over the years in the health and wellness space, it's still lower than their numbers. So I mean,
You have something to aim for.
No, yes, in some ways, but no, more so like I trust them with health advice. This is the direction I've gone for the last 10 years of my life, and seeing where they're at with it and just the way they live their lives and just the health they exude. I think along the way we've obviously been misled. I think there's a lot more to someone's blood work than obviously just a cholesterol number. And this was something obviously we discussed in the past and then we hope to share to more people.
Exactly.
But also hoping to learn in the process, as I want to make sure that I'm doing all I can.
You're not mucking something up.
Yeah.
But you want to also be optimal.
Yes.
You're looking for optimal health.
Right.
And we'll rewind a little bit because we kind of just jumped ahead. And I want Dr. Rob because I feel like he has a lot of expertise and understanding in the area. So what would you describe your diet as right now?
As a label or like more set in stone, more or less what it is I eat on a daily basis?
Just is a shorter version.
So to give people
is it high fat, high protein? Would that be fair to say?
Pretty much.
Okay. Why?
More so for optimal health. When I think of optimal health, I don't just think of functioning in terms of the bare minimums of 10,000 steps a day or just being able to sit up off a chair or functioning. I think of, can I go for a run, go for a hike, sprint to high levels, sleep well, feel good, be mentally sharp, be able to do work, be able to go about my day and not feel
a high athletic capability.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of it as well. So I look at it as not just the athletic capability and functional capability, but also mentally. And I find especially with a diet higher in fat really does help spark the brain.
Well, there is a lot of research for that. Maybe Dr. Rob can speak on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, before we talk about any diets, as naturopaths, we go through quite a bit of training and nutrition.
Yeah.
And from practicing and everything, I think what I've come to have as more of a philosophy is that you're going to see all this different research come out on different diets, what works, what's the best diet. And I think it's all bullshit because everyone's individual. So I don't necessarily think that there's one diet that works for everybody.
Right.
But I do think everyone has a diet that works for them.
Yeah.
And you've got to find it. There's no other way. You can read about all the different ones. We got to try it to see.
So based on what Anthony is saying, in your experience working with athletes, I don't think a lot of athletes necessarily in the past had followed such a, I don't know if I don't want to say an extreme type of dieting, but in comparison to the average diet, it is extreme.
Yeah, on a spectrum.
Do you know how much like protein and fat you consume in a day? Like
personally?
Yeah.
If I could guess, if I had to, I try to hit I weigh about 180, 185. So I try to hit about 150 to 170 grams of protein a day. I don't go right up to, I find 180 is a lot to consume. I just don't know where I can put it. Like I'm just too full. And maybe fat, I don't know, maybe 120 grams. I don't actually count. I don't even look. I find the easiest way to consume fat is like, you don't even notice it in your cooking oils. Like I always use animal fat, maybe butter or ghee, but for the most part, that's my focus. And, you put 1 or 2 tablespoons into a pot to cook with. or into a pan to cook with. And before you know it, you're already at like, 50, 60 grams. Plus, I mean, I consume 3 to 5 eggs a day at least. So, I mean, that's predominantly where my fat comes from, maybe half an avocado, but it's mostly the cooking oils where I'm going to find it. Like, it's not like
Would it make sense for you
taking a
just
stick
to
of
own a
butter.
bunch of chickens?
That'd be amazing. We can't have livestock in Richmond Hill. Can you
We
believe that?
used to. You know
We
what?
used to. I know.
Richmond Hill used to be livestock central.
I know, my neighbors. Rabbits, chickens.
Probably get a goat in there.
That'd be amazing.
So,
Yeah,
Dr. Rob, based on that, I mean, the average MD, even the average naturopath, they would kind of like fall off the chair hearing that. It's like, dude, you're gonna have a clot right here.
Yep. I'm just laughing at the half an avocado with everything else.
Well, yeah, no. Like,
You don't want to overdo it with the avocado.
Maybe give me a
Save
full
some for
avocado.
tomorrow, I guess.
So I worked a lot with like ketogenic type diets,
Of course.
for different reasons. But I have found that a lot of people do well off that switch to fat. I've seen it go the other way too. Just people feel like garbage, and
Yeah.
that's fine because that's their body's needs. I also teach the sports nutrition stuff, and it's funny because the textbook I'm supposed to teach out of is very against what you're saying.
Oh, I know. It's higher carbs. And like, I can speak to that as well. Like, I do notice athletically there can be a drawback, right? Like,
No, yes and no.
yeah, you're right. It depends on what it like. But there are times I'll go through training where I'll notice if I'm, depending what I'm doing, consuming a bit of rice can make all the difference, right? If I'm going really higher fat and really low carb, I don't really still go low carb. I hate even saying that. My focal point is the meat that's on my plate, and everything else to me is secondary. Like, I put quality protein as the utmost importance. And then fat just kind of comes into play because I'm using it as my.
I find
my
it
cooking
interesting
base.
when I talk to people about this. Their focus is not on as much as like how much they're having; it's the quality of what they're having, which is
Absolutely.
interesting because I'm hearing this and I'm like, "Wow, that's a lot of protein." It's like, yeah, but it's good quality,
Yeah,
and it's like that's an important point. Like, I think it's like it does matter
For sure.
Like, you can have like bad protein or bad sources or maybe not the right cuts of protein. Would you say, is there anything, like something to avoid when it comes to protein?
I'm not going to go. I mean, I look at, and this may be counterculture, and which is why we're having this conversation. I look, you know this, Jason, but I look at a lot of wild game. So I do a lot of bison, elk. Always prefer a grass-fed steak. I think even going to a lower tiered ground beef is okay. I limit pork for no other reason than I just find it just doesn't agree with me as well. Chicken and turkey to me is just way too lean, and anything I need like layers of condiments to down because it's just too dry. Not a fan. I do eat chicken. I think it's okay, but I mean, even thinking in terms of their diets and how much nutrition is really being extracted from a chicken, like their diets aren't the greatest to begin with.
They're alive for like a week.
Right. Well, yeah, and like it's just not. I think a cow that was raised on pasture or a bison that was roaming freely on grasslands, I feel like it just has more nutrition to offer. So that's kind of where my focus is. If I go to a restaurant and chicken's on the menu and I want some chicken souvlaki or something, I'm not going to say no. But
I would find out like if the chicken had like a good quality life.
That'd be nice. No restaurant is going to tell you. Actually, in Portugal, they did. They said this cow came from when you drive in over on that hill.
Remember that cow?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It was crazy, and it was
Gone.
actually the best steak I ever had in my life.
Well, yeah.
Like I try to center it more towards quality meats, but also like to that point of going to a restaurant. To me, what's more important is the oils that they're using to cook a lot of this stuff, because I think there's just a lot. Most places are using canola, soybean, garbage, rancid vegetable and seed oils, and to me, that's the bigger problem than the meat itself.
So would you say, I want to throw it to Dr. Rob, maybe it is an issue of like the cholesterol, maybe it's not just your cholesterol number. Maybe it's the quality and the types of oils and fats that are coming in that would have a greater indicator on your health, as opposed to like, but I'm eating the cleanest stuff that you can have. Like maybe it is good fuel coming in is more important than how much.
Yeah, the thing with the cholesterol number is as a base for a population, it's a pretty good indicator. Most people that are going to have high cholesterol, probably not in the best health. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it's a one-size-fits-all approach for somebody like you who's exercising. Like you can just, this is recorded. You can see what you look like.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a concern for someone who's exercising. But for most people, it's the same as like BMI. Like
Yes.
you work at a gym,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about right
Yeah.
away. BMI for most people, fairly accurate
I'm
indicator.
overweight. I'm an overweight guy
You're
who
probably
needs to
obese.
lose like 10. Yeah.
Yeah. But so the same goes for cholesterol, where for most people, if it's high and they're sedentary, it's going to cause a risk because there's more cholesterol to have a chance to create a problem for it.
Right.
But if the cholesterol is healthy and it's doing what it's supposed to do,
Right.
and you're eating a lot of fat, the role of cholesterol is to move fat around in the
Right.
body. If you're having a lot of fat, you need more of it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it is. If it's healthy, there's no reason for concern because it's moving through the arteries. It's not causing a buildup of
Right.
plaque or anything like that. What we find is damaged cholesterol and inflammation from sedentary lifestyle, smoking, pollution, some stuff you can't avoid. That's going to cause the risk because now you have more cholesterol that can potentially be damaged.
Right.
So I think it's the pairing of the two that we often overlook and skip over that piece where if you're healthy, doing everything right, you're having good quality. I love the chat on the quality of the fats and everything. Then there's nothing to be concerned about.
Well, there was a great analogy, and I think I gave this to you in the past when we spoke, but there's an analogy I heard, and they kind of discussed cholesterol and how it's been kind of misled to the public. Like even HDL and LDL, it goes further than that. But I mean, they both serve a role. Like as much as HDL is considered the good cholesterol and LDL is considered the bad, it's not that one is necessarily good or bad. They're both performing their roles. And the analogy was that consider yourself, driving down a highway, and every time you saw an ambulance, you'd sit there and think, hey, these ambulances are causing all these crashes. But just because the ambulance was at the scene of the crime doesn't mean it caused it, right? So when they're finding cholesterol at the site of a clot or it's essentially the scene of the crime, and it's not that the cholesterol caused the problem. It's more that it was simply there. Yeah. And so as cholesterol circulates through the body, if there's arterial scarring or there's clotting and buildup, now cholesterol can't go and do its job. So it's going to get jammed up, and then you end up with.
What would be causing this level of damage in the cell wall and the arterial wall?
Yeah, I love that because there's something we don't test often. And honestly, I don't even know if we have access to testing it. It's not on our list of things, but you can test regular cholesterol. We can do that. Everyone can run that. What gets missed and is very prevalent in the research is something called oxidized LDL, which is damaged LDL. And the higher rate you have of this LDL ox, the way higher your chances are of having stroke, heart attack, any cardiovascular disease. But we just don't look at it. It might be more expensive. It might be something that will just cost. And like when you look at things on a population basis, you're running millions of these tests. You want to keep costs low. It's simpler to run just cholesterol. And I get that because there is, like, we pay taxes. We keep saying our healthcare is free. It's the most expensive thing that we get garbage. Just a bad return on investment for. But it's this damaged LDL that's now been hit by free radicals, which kind of disrupt things that make it sticky. If it's not damaged, it's not sticky. But if it is, then it starts to form these plaques. Right. It causes disruption, more things pile up, and then you get that kind of clogging off. But there are even instances where people have had heart attacks, the surgeons checking out the arteries that are involved, and they're not blocked. Yeah. You can have a heart attack at like a 90% blocked artery at like a 10%. And it's really this inflammation piece that gets breezed over and kind of ignored. Yep. I don't know why.
And that's kind of the way we discussed it briefly in the past, was that it was, your inflammatory markers are probably a bigger concern than that just cholesterol number in and of itself.
You know what doesn't get bad enough of a rap? The carbs we're consuming.
They're absolutely.
I mean, it's sort of just a generally accepted thing. It's like you have maybe 40% of your diet is carbohydrate for some people, and it's probably higher for a lot of people. And the types of carbs that they're having are no good either. Plus inactivity. Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm doing someone's body composition, and the in-body machine's cool because it does body fat and visceral fat. And I can always tell when someone's either they're doing an inappropriate type of fasting where they're just skipping meals. There's not an intention behind it. It's not intermittent. Or they're having high carbs at the end of the day. I'm going to see that body fat creeping up. And even if their weight isn't necessarily high, and then their visceral fat will be quite high.
Yeah, like anything.
And it's a hidden danger because you don't necessarily see the effects of visceral fat. Like you might notice it, like if you know what you're looking for. But someone can have lower relative percentage body fat because they don't have a ton of fat like hanging over their waistline, but their liver is just suffocated.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bigger indicator.
A lot of that yo-yo dieting we know puts
Sure.
fat back around the organs, which is that visceral as opposed to subcutaneous. So you might have dropped weight, you feel good, you gain it back, you lose it again because it's summer, and every time you do that, there's more risk because you're building that fat layer around those organs where you don't want too much of it. Some is fine. You need some.
You have to have some. What would be a good way for the average person to get rid of their visceral fat?
It's like any targeted, like you probably get asked this all the time, like how do I lose fat around here or there? You just got to change the lifestyle because anything short term is not going to work and you can't really target it. You can't force your body there. I would say the biggest thing is probably stress though.
That's right.
Cortisol messes with everything and it loves to store fat right around the gut. And when it's there, it's going to get close. That's where the organs are. If you're storing fat around the hips, fine. It's less risky. We know that with seeing like women and men and their fat deposit patterns where men just testosterone wise but store fat around the gut. Women get it around the hips and women get less cardiovascular disease and all. So I'd say cortisol is the biggest one that trumps all of it because it kind of disrupts the rest and lets the body store things right around the midline. And that's no good, but it's hard to target any one thing without long-term changes. That's the biggest piece.
Well, it's kind of to your point of the visceral fat, I guess, unless you've done a scan, who really knows what their visceral fat scores would be?
Well, that's why every patient here gets their in-body analysis. Because, I mean, it's a number that they have no knowledge of. They don't understand what it is.
They'd be looking at it and have no idea as to what, how unless, like, you obviously recognize this, where being able to,
Come on in, Dr.
recognizing it's a lifestyle. And it's not like there's going to be just one. Like, I can't sit here and just say you have to start exercising. Like, no. How's your sleep? How's your hydration? How's your, like, when we talk about nutrition, everyone says they have a good diet or they eat clean, but I don't think people even know what that means. Like, my definition of clean is going to be different, maybe slightly different than yours, maybe different than yours.
Yeah, and it would probably not be at your level. Because, I mean, I think it's safe to say your diet is consistent with, like, a very specific athletic group. Not like even most athletes, like a hockey player couldn't eat like you.
I think they could.
I don't think they'd have the endurance.
That's where
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, there's an adaptation that comes in. So a lot of people switching to like a higher fat, higher protein diet will suffer performance-wise for a bit.
Yep, 100%.
After about 2 weeks, it kind of levels out. But things like hockey, I like that you said hockey specifically, tend to just work on a different energy system that would benefit from the carbs.
Absolutely.
Pasta.
Yeah, it's
Pre-game
tried
pasta.
and true. And that's just because the explosive quick shift, like all out, if it's a cardiovascular event or something like that, like a marathon, cycling, swimming, perfectly fine. They've done studies on elite cyclists where in the first few weeks after changing, everything gets worse. But after about that 2 weeks, they get better, not better. They go back to where they were before. And I think that's an important key. The difference is really were carbs affecting them, like making them feel sluggish after, digestive problems, or do they feel better on this high fat diet? Because their performance can be the same.
So that would be the purpose then, is like you're not going to get a performance gain, but you might just feel better, cleaner.
And that was the other part, is I think some of these diets might be, so I look a lot at like the macro space, right? Like a lot of people count macros, and not that I'm against counting macros. I think it helps from a body because composition, just from that perspective of I want to change my body composition, I think there's elements of macro counting that would really go far. But people aren't really in tune with their bloating, with their satiety, with like how, like their frequent hunger, their hunger signaling. Like these are all things that on a personal side, these are things I try to focus on and what I want to try to get away from. Like I want to try to feel good consistently, and just be more in tune with my body, not just hit targets for sake of aesthetics. Someone can have really clean aesthetics and look great, but internally there could be all kinds of problems. So like, where I'm trying to come from is more feeling good, performing well as my focal point. Whether or not, like, I'm not looking to perform to peak capacity and be a Olympic competitor. I just want to feel good on a day to day and be as active as possible and whatnot.
That's such an important point because a lot of people will see it as like if you're working with elite athletes, that a fraction of a second difference is going to mean the difference between a paycheck and not, or a podium finish and nothing, then you don't want to mess with what's working for them.
100%.
But if they're feeling like garbage and they've got 4 years till the next Olympics, perfect time to try something to see if they can get that same performance, maybe better, probably not, but maybe the same without any of the digestive issues, the bloating, and that stuff hits them hard once they retire.
Yeah.
That's the other big piece, is when you stop performing at that level, like your body's a different machine when your job is exercise.
Yes.
And then when you stop, it changes and you don't, and things go wrong.
When I was looking at like retired bodybuilders, it's sad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just what happened. I mean, a couple of them, unless you like just commit to like a life in the gym, like maybe they run a gym or they just train people, then they look okay. But the ones that like just like stop,
Cold turkey, like done.
oh, like
Injuries.
Jabba the Hutt,
I think
fall
you
apart.
can even make the argument for even like tradespeople or anyone who's got a more active job that's more physically enduring. The second you cut it, like that's
anyone who retires really. Like even just like someone who's an office job, they walk the hall 10 times a day. Like that drop off. Everyone just gains weight just when they stop doing things.
Yep.
There was a stat, I think it was more so down south, but with kids during the 2-year pandemic.
I'm sure obesity.
It was like 40% increase down south, which it was already absurd. A 40% increase is drastic.
You know what? I'm leaning away from it just being a lack of activity. I think it's just
100%.
95% diet at this point. I think the diet is just
between the two of them
bad.
Yeah. Oh, I know that.
But what we understand as like the components of a normal diet, it just the makeup doesn't make sense.
So then, what about the direction it seems to be heading? Because I mean, you've seen my social feed. I'm very adamant about like I can't stand.
Well, there's this like pro-veganism thing that we kind of rant against. But I mean, I'm not against vegetables.
No, and I'm not even saying that. I'm trying to make the argument more for like when people. I think people should be eating. I think people need to be eating more quality stuff. Period. Mm-hmm. But meat is a part of that equation. I think a lot of us, and being in a gym space, I can speak to a lot of people I know. I think people are just calorically deficient, and I think we've created this a poor mindset towards food. It's almost like we feel guilty for eating. Like,
well, I think we are guilted into the things that maybe are not on vogue, like having meat. Like if someone says, "Oh, I had a nice steak," and some people will be like, "Ugh." I'm like, no, that's your choice. That's fine. Like if you don't want it, but I mean, it's not like you're eating like plastic or eating garbage. Like I would have, there would be almost a justification if someone just said, I just had a bunch of processed food. That would be, I think, more justified. Be like, do you know what you're doing to yourself?
Yeah. And there's something to be said about the quality of nutrients, but even just, if my base metabolic rate is like 1900 calories a day or 1950, and I'm only consuming 13 to 1400, I'm always at a deficit. My body's in a constant state of stress. If my body's in that constant state of stress, this isn't going to be able to do anything.
Yeah, we see it with like female athletes too, where it used to be the norm to train to the point that their period disappeared. Yeah. That's terrible. We thought it was a fat thing, like too low body fat. It seems to be more of a caloric deficit, and it's harder in people that are training a lot because they may not seem like they're under eating. Right. It's a relative thing. If you're training, that you should be having 5,000 calories.
I'd also throw that out there for fertility.
Yeah, big time.
Which is another big problem.
Period going.
Well, I mean, even if they're having a regular period, but I mean, and someone who's a non-athlete, but someone who's struggling to conceive, sometimes the first thing I get them to do is gain 5 pounds of fat, which is a hard sell. But because like there is also a drive that like during their pregnancy to like gain the minimum amount of weight possible and to lose the maximum amount right after.
Yeah.
This is all social media.
Big swing.
Big time social media. It's like
poisoning.
We celebrate the pregnant body, but then discourage the after pregnant body. And
even the practitioners are giving women like, well, you don't want to lose too much, or you don't want to gain too much. And it's like, okay, like what are you going to do? Double your weight? No, not necessarily. But I mean, gain 70% more than what you had, maybe. If that's what's necessary, if that happens naturally, I mean, I'm always saying like you got a hall pass, do whatever you want. Worry about it later.
Yeah,
You follow that kid around, you're going to lose it.
It's true. Oh man, those kids. Speaking of, I want to go back to that sleep component you mentioned, because just as an example, like sleep is so important for proper functioning of the body, hormones, cholesterol, everything. As a perspective of something I'm currently going through, my wife just had a baby. I can't imagine her side of things, but my side is I'm not sleeping through the night. I haven't changed much of my diet. My exercise has definitely decreased because the sleep's not there. I don't have the energy. But the weight that's come on, it's never in my life have I gained 15 pounds from not changing too much. And it's just like this thing you can't stop if you're not, like, that's the sleep thing. We kind of talk about it. I try to stress it a lot with my patients, and I feel like no matter how much I stress it, it's not stressed enough.
Yeah.
It's so damn important.
It's not sexy to talk about, okay, how much sleep, or like, how are you doing? What are you doing for stress management? It's kind of like, yeah, okay, I know this, but like, well, just give me a pill or give me a really, really strict diet, like cut my calories. I'm like, it's not that.
No,
like,
sleep.
Yeah. What time 1, 2. I'm like, what are you doing? Nothing. I'm on my phone. You're just killing yourself.
Yeah.
It sets you up down the road, even, like, especially with kids specifically. If kids have these screens in front of their faces right until bedtime, the downstream effect of this 15, 20 years down the road, when, like,
10 minutes down the road, they ain't going to sleep that night.
But like we briefly touched on fertility issues. Is like, this is the start of it. It's massive amounts of stress. It's chronic stress, essentially, that leads to the breakdown of hormones. And if your body's not communicating, you're going to be a shitstorm.
We live in a society that really likes numbers. And so it's not always the right thing. But like, what would you say is a good measure for stress?
I use an example with my patients when they say they're not stressed. Phones and cars. Every time your phone buzzes and you feel that little pang, that's stress. And then cars. I use this one as a funny one because people will normalize stress, and I think cars emphasize it the most, where when you're driving and someone does something to cut you off or whatever it is, you immediately go to anger. Yeah. And that's because you're...
The road rage. I ask the people all the time.
Instant. And they wouldn't do it. This is the point I'm making, is that when it's in a car, it's a high-stakes situation. You don't feel stressed until something goes wrong, and then you realize that you were there.
But you justify it. Like, you somehow, like, because you're in a car, it's almost like there's like a barrier. Like, you almost like feel like less inhibited, because it's like, I don't know that person. I can give them the finger. I can honk. I can swear. I can scream. There's no ill effect, like, unless you're unfortunately going to be attacked in a road rage.
Yeah, that happens.
It does happen more and more.
I don't even mean the barrier thing. I mean as a cortisol thing, because you could do the same thing walking on the street. Low stress environment. I might not know you. I bump you by accident. We're Canadian. We'll probably both apologize. Maybe even be friends after it. But it's not a stressful environment, so there's nothing there. But you physically bump.
So you're saying driving is a high stress state that maybe you don't even recognize.
Exactly.
I got you.
And we see that throughout the day, where we might not think we're stressed until something goes wrong and we snap at a partner or something like that puts us over the edge, where we're like, I'm not stressed. And then you're just rage all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Definitely when the phone rings, that is a huge trigger.
Yep.
I'm old enough to remember when we had one phone on the wall, it rang 4 times, and there was no call display, and there's no voicemail. So it's like, oh, I guess they'll call back. That was the attitude.
Yeah.
It's insanity. If someone called my phone, if it rings once, I'm already like, don't hit, like, the second ring is like already like I'm pushing it.
Yep.
And if I miss it, I'm checking my voicemail. I'm checking the call display. It's like, what's this urgency, this desperation? It wasn't there 20 years, 30 years ago.
It's funny. I have the opposite. Whenever I see that I've missed a call and I have a voicemail, my stress response is I don't want to check it.
An avoidance, right?
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, I don't go to the mailbox. It's going to be all bills.
Exactly. But we're in stressful environments, and we just don't appreciate that we're there. And then the sleep goes away, and it just gets worse.
I still want to like pick on the idea of like having a number. Like, I do Konigsberg testing. Like, it's a urine test that measures urinary chloride to see how much is being output. It's almost like a measure of aldosterone. It's a stress marker. So either you got the right amount, way too much, which is a hyper state of adrenal function, or really, really low or 0 when you're in an exhausted state. So that kind of takes people through like, okay, I have things to do, but I get it done, to, it's been really busy. I'm putting in extra hours. The baby's waking me up at night. That's in the hyper state. You're getting things done, but you're starting to feel it. And that's a normal thing, assuming it regresses and goes back to normal. But if that keeps going for too long, and then your resources and your nutrition and your sleep and all that doesn't replenish that adrenal function, you get into that exhausted state. And that's when people come in to the clinic. That's when people book their appointment. Because I would say that adrenal function is like a force field, and it just helps your organs do what they have to do. But when you reach that point where you're adrenally fatigued and exhausted, that force field is gone. So now that added stress is impairing your organs from doing what they're supposed to do. And now the weak spots are starting to show up, and these symptoms are starting to creep in. And because usually people book their appointment when first they like, I have these symptoms, I'm feeling this, I don't know what's going on. How do we fix it? And to me, it's like, yeah, there's like, there's some kind of deficiencies and this and that, and something's going on. But it's that adrenal fatigue, that exhaustion that creeps in, that now you are susceptible. Now you're starting to see the cracks kind of rising up to the surface. And to me, that's a good measure. It's a good test for people to kind of get an idea of where they are stress-wise, because otherwise you don't have a number. It's not like a blood pressure. I mean, blood pressure can do it, but it's so transient. It's like most of the time it's normal.
It fluctuates so easily too.
So we need numbers.
We've got some.
Yes. No, that's a good transition.
Happy to go over.
Are you okay with us discussing?
Yeah, all
Perfect.
good, man.
So you sent over your blood work, had a quick look. There are some things that I definitely want to talk about. We've talked about the cholesterol. I don't know if we want to go over it again with what the numbers were. And where
just quickly, maybe just say what his total cholesterol is.
Do you want to read out your stats?
I'll let you do it because these I had to change over the metrics because these were all, I guess,
Canadian.
Yeah,
the U.S.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything I was trying to compare it to, it was like, oh, what the heck? This is. And then when I actually leveled it out, I was like, okay, I'm not as bad as I.
When you saw the different deaths, whatever it is, the conversion. Yeah. So the triglycerides were at 1.28, which actually surprised me for being pretty low. Those are the ones that are showing kind of what's being stored more than floating around, but low for what the rest is. The total cholesterol came back at 6.96, the HDL 1.75. Non-HDL was at 5.2, and the LDL was at 4.6. The ratio was at 4. Your HDL cholesterol, so the good stuff, is fairly high. I like seeing it for even better to get above 2. Mm-hmm. Usually it's like a fish oil or vitamin B3, niacin, is that B3? Yeah. Can help do some of that. But the other ones don't concern me because of the rest of you. And I think we get too caught up on, like, our medical system is like, look at this, and I don't see you over there.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't care who you are as a person. Yeah. I see these numbers. Yeah. I give you medication. Yeah. Get them lower because statistics say this, but we don't look at the whole person, and that needs to change. So the higher the HDL, the better, just because it does do the cleaning up. But if there's not need for cleaning up because you're doing things healthfully, I wouldn't be concerned with these numbers, just taking you into account. The other... some other numbers that I wanted to talk about. You had mentioned the gamma glutamyl transfer, the GGT.
Yes.
So what that is a marker. It's a liver enzyme. Yep. And if the liver is damaged, basically this enzyme leaks out a little bit. So it's a marker for liver. Could be anything. It's not specific, but something with the liver. I have looked up research with GGT, and I actually use this as an indicator for overall health. There's been a study. Now, I can't pull the paper up, so I hope you don't call me out on it. I have it somewhere, but it was a while back. I looked at it, and they were kind of repurposing this GGT test to see what else it could indicate. And they found that the lower this number got, the better. Specific ranges for men and women. I believe for women it was under 11 and men was under 15. And the lower, the better predictor it had for overall health. So you being flagged as low for that is a good thing.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of confused with. I saw there was issues in terms of if it was high. And then I think I mentioned to you when I emailed you just the panel on one of, are you familiar with Paul Saladino?
Yeah.
Okay. On one of his podcasts, he went over his blood work and kind of explained things. And I was listening to it, and he was we'll get into the ferritin piece, but there was a link between ferritin and GGT. I can't remember what he said. There was a lot to digest, but I couldn't find anything online in terms of it being low. I assumed it was an okay thing. Yep. I didn't know that specifically.
Yeah, so there are markers, so it's a good indicator. Like it being flagged low, fantastic. Keep it there. You're in a good spot. It's a cheap test too. It's like $3. I usually just tag it on if someone's getting some other blood work just to see where it's at and kind of give them an indicator. Like if we can get this number lower, it's better for you. And really to retest it, it's $3. So let's keep tracking that instead of big expensive panels. The other piece, you had mentioned the ferritin. I'm not surprised by the ferritin being high, even though I can't find it right now. Where did it go?
Might be on a different page because there was two different.
Right. Just make sure I'm not skipping it. No, it's here. There we go. So you were flagged at high at 357. It's high. You eat a lot of meat. Yeah. You don't have a period. You're not losing the blood. So that ferritin adds up. I would usually recommend, like for men, just like donate blood. To try to just lower those levels. There's not much else aside from. Is it that
simple? Of just like donate? I've read that in the past. I think it was Mercola that mentioned this about men should be donating blood like every 6 months.
Yeah, our iron, the ferritin levels go up, and it's harder to bring them down.
Is it just purely like a consumption and escalation? Like theoretically, if you just continued eating the same amount of protein and meat, like, is it just forever going to increase up to like 1,000, 2,000? Like, or is there not a self-regulating effect? Like, I mean, I think when, to me, when red blood cells are, they are destroyed in the spleen, there's got to be some kind of, reuptake or elimination where those cells are kind of like, the waste is removed from you.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think what it emphasizes is really we have ranges based on, again, normal basic population stuff, and we don't take into account someone that has a carnivore diet or something like that. So maybe the ranges need to be adjusted and the body should regulate, but maybe at a higher amount, whereas it seems abnormal, but it's not abnormal that it would indicate liver damage or anything like that. So it's not high enough. How long have you been eating the way that you're eating?
I've been consistent with more of like keto paleo lifestyles for since I first came to you like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah.
If it would keep going forever, I think it'd be a lot higher because I've seen people not on stuff like that.
I kind of go in and out. Like I always eat relatively clean and always try to focus on quality. But I'll go through periods where I'll have more leaner cuts of chicken from time to time. Like right now, I'm actually doing meal deliveries for one meal a day, so I'm having more chicken, more salmon. Whereas normally I never cook that because there's no satiety there for me. I just find it way too light, and I just need too much of it to feel. To feel satisfied.
Very lean,
right? So no, for the most part, I've gone through I went through like a vegetarian stage, which I'm not happy about. It was only like 3-4 weeks.
At least you tried it.
Yeah, I did, and it felt like garbage.
But I'm
physically unable to perform when I say garbage.
So that's I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I think one thing that I would want to investigate is like, how long do you think that you're going to maintain your athletic? The level of athleticism.
The level, I don't know. I hope to maintain my level for another 15 to 20 years. I'm 37. I got people in my gym in their mid 50s and they're still crushing, and I'm not expecting.
But did they start 20 years ago?
No, I don't know. I think most of my clientele have always been active. Like I look at this as a little bit more athletic, especially in terms of what we're doing. But I mean, I hope to still be doing a lot of what I can do today, but just not to the same degree. I don't train like I did 5-10 years ago either.
Yeah.
But I hope to be able to maintain my athleticism for as long as I can.
Do you feel like in order to maintain that you have to keep up the level of protein?
No. And I think as I age, I will naturally I think
that's what my question.
Yeah. And that I'll drop down on for sure. I don't think I'll have to eat 160 to 180 grams of protein.
I would say it's probably long term, even as an athlete, it's still a lot for your body to process.
I think yes, I agree with that. But I also, again, I think it's in reference to
where you are right now.
Yes.
Like in 5-10 years from now, maybe you're having
I think it'll
half
be 120,
of that.
Or
a third, 2/3. Yeah.
I figure if there's 3 meals a day, if I'm having 30 grams of protein in each meal, there's almost 100. And I feel like that's a fair amount.
Seems like
if I'm on the decline and just want to stay fit, sure. I'm trying to maintain obviously level of performance and strength. So I'm trying to consume.
So to me, it's like it's an evolution.
Yep.
Like it's always where you are right now. It's not where you're necessarily going to be in performance 10 years from now.
No.
You might lean down.
Yeah.
You might, I don't know, do some martial arts.
Yeah. I'm looking at that actually.
How did I know that?
Things will definitely change.
Because it just seems like things have a progression.
Yes.
They just go in a direction. It's like, I'm going to be a ninja now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I find it funny that we like to criticize kind of I'll call it extreme ends. Like we'll criticize vegan, we'll criticize what you're doing, but we never criticize enough the middle that is the standard American diet. And when I try to change people off of eating garbage for breakfast and I tell them have a steak in the morning, like you don't need breakfast foods, have a steak on top of some salad, and they look at me like I'm crazy. But I think if you're eating waffles in the morning, that's crazy. That's a terrible way to start the day. And we know breakfast is the most important meal. It doesn't matter that it's first thing, it can be later, but your first meal is important. And we're starting it with a Tim's muffin, something like that. Like that's not good. And I'm looked at like, whoa, that's a radical change. Like, what do you mean I can have a salad?
It is radical because everything you were led to believe and taught in school is just the opposite of this.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
So now, like, what body of evidence do we have to convince people?
Our blood work.
Blood work.
Looked at as an individual.
So the fact that you don't have cardiovascular disease is the proof.
I think it's definitely a part of it. I'm not saying it's the only thing. I'm one person. Everyone else is obviously going to have, like, I don't think what I'm doing is necessarily for everybody, but I do think
that's for sure.
But I think there's pieces of it that are, and I think that's
I
quality of protein and limiting, trying to
that
cut
would
out
be for
vegetable and
everyone.
seed oils
Yeah,
and
so the
sugars.
quality of your food, that should apply to everyone.
Right. So I don't think everyone needs 180 grams of protein. I rarely hit that. I still find that difficult. But you know, if someone's bodybuilding or is looking for an aesthetic and they're working with a nutrition coach, you better believe that they're getting their body weight in grams of protein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Assured, right? Which is, I often tell people, it's like, even when people want to lose weight, you need to eat more. People don't.
That is a hard sell
that.
for some people.
We have this disillusioned idea of nutrition and wellness. Like we have such a divide. People are afraid of eating.
And I find it funny when people come in eating the way they've been with the health problems that develop. And then when you try to change something, they're like, isn't that bad for you? Isn't steak bad for you? I'm like, what have you been doing that's been good for you that got you overweight, that's seen diabetes on the rise, that got cardiovascular disease? Like we're seeing these things by following our food guide and no one wants to challenge it. Like it's just law.
You know, a friend of mine, and I didn't get a chance to read the article, but he sent me an article today about Canada's healthcare system. And something like, I hope I don't butcher this. It was like, I'm going to say between 70 and 80% of our healthcare dollars are pretty much spent on problems attributed to sugar and obesity. Mm-hmm. And that's no surprise, obviously, in this room, but like to people out there, like this is a manageable thing we can fix. And anytime I bring this up with people and they're like, oh, well, people aren't going to change their diet. We got the entire world to mask up in 24 hours. We shut down the world in 24 hours. If you show enough.
But this is a slow kill, right? Yeah. This isn't like,
that's the problem.
Is
that like people think that, right? It's like I can have sugar in my coffee and it's not going to kill me, but you keep doing it and it will add up. And this is.
You guys ever see that little meme or that video that went on the internet 10 years ago where it pretty much was outlining, it's like, okay, we had a high fat diet maybe 50, 60 years ago. And then rates of heart disease were increasing. So they're like, well, how are we going to drop fat? So it's like, throw in a bunch of sugar. Yeah. And that was the solution. It's just, and then you have diabetes and cancer skyrocketing.
Yeah. And sugar tastes good, feels good.
Yeah. It creates that addiction. So you keep going back and you buy more.
Yeah. I always refer to it as a drug and the hardest one to kick because no one cares. No one encourages it. Where like, if you were addicted to heroin and came to a party, I wouldn't offer you heroin. But if it was sugar and you said, no, I'm cutting out sugar, I'd be like, just have my dessert. Like nobody cares.
It's my birthday.
Yeah.
Heroin's an extreme example, but like maybe cigarettes. They'll respect that you're trying to get off cigarettes, but never sugar.
Never sugar, I know.
They're almost offended when you don't take it. It's
absolutely
it's a weird thing.
So the other idea that comes to my mind is, what if it's not just purely like what you're eating? What if it's just the lack of activity that's so grossly twisting this? Because like, I think a lot of people on average, they probably have okay diets, not great. Come in, Dr. Amanda, it's okay. We're just live. You're not interrupting. Don't feel bad. People aren't active.
Yeah.
And that's what's sabotaging, I think, even just like a borderline poor diet. Some people have decent, like one or two good meals. They throw in a little extra sugar and carb, but no one's moving. Everyone's extremely idle. So it's like, I would say, even if their garbage diet stayed the same, but you moved, you actually trained 4 times a week, it almost would like be okay.
I don't think it would be perfectly fine if you only ate
I wouldn't say it's
McDonald's.
perfect.
Yeah, but I think you could get away
Like
with eating a
the
lot
makeup
more.
of the high carb diet that most people have. It's like you can't have high carbs if you're not moving.
Yep.
And it'd be like people like, I get 10,000 steps. It's like, yeah, but it's not really a good step.
And then here's the other piece that I think gets missed. And I think if we're gonna go towards that point of like changing the whole equation, I don't think moving is necessarily enough. I think understanding, and I'm obviously a big proponent of mobility and movement as a whole, but understanding moving your joints through their full capacity on a daily basis, because walking is it's gonna get the blood, like obviously someone who's 75, 80 years old, hey, whatever you can give me is amazing, but I don't think it should just be a baseline standard of 10,000 steps. And I understand why these are the recommendations, but I think there needs to be more incentive or more push for even further, like understanding the value of a squat, understanding the value of bringing yourself up off the floor, moving your arms through the full ranges of motion, being able to hang and hold yourself up. Small little things like that don't seem like much, but having the capacity to do that is a great sign of overall health.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because the 10,000 steps a day, it's always like you got to meet people where they're at, but also we've gotten to a point where our baseline is 10,000 steps a day, and that's
Right.
a problem.
Yeah.
And it should be like maybe you should be able to do 100 push-ups a day
Yeah,
instead of
or something like, just look
raise
towards
the bar.
Yeah, like I don't think we should be looking at the minimums. Like we should be aiming towards optimal, and it's not that we expect everyone to get there. But give them a target, give them something to strive for. Because I mean, I don't even know what 10,000 steps is. Maybe 5 kilometers, 4 kilometers. What is 10,000 steps? I don't know.
Depends how tall you are.
Yeah, that too. But like I think there needs to be more than just moving. I think there needs to be a point of trying to move well, because it's not just the biggest fear of the elderly is falling and not being able to get themselves back up, right? So me stepping, if I have really short strides, me getting my 10,000 steps isn't really going to do too much in terms of my overall health. But if I have the capacity to get myself off the floor consistently and move well.
So this is functional movement and the biology of movement.
Yes.
Because the thought occurred to me yesterday. It's like most people don't even know the names of their body parts or their muscles, or they don't even know, they don't even recognize that how to move, like swing their arms and how to pick something up properly. It's like, when was the last time you did a calf raise? So I'm like, what if people like actually started to learn about how their body's supposed to function?
Well, we did in the 40s and 50s. Gym class was gymnastics. Right now, gym class is, here kids, take a hockey stick and go run around in a basketball court.
We'll take it.
It's great, but like we're so detached from our bodies. We don't know.
That's right.
We don't know ourselves anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece, just to go back to the blood work there, that I didn't want to forget, because I think it's interesting for a lot of people to understand, was your B12 levels.
Yes.
So B12, vitamin that's responsible for like red blood cell formation, energy kind of deal, even some carbohydrate fat metabolism. It's supposed to come from red meat.
Yeah.
We see it as like, if you're low in B12, eat more red meat. If you menstruate and you're losing it, you're probably be lower in B12. You have to have more red meat to compensate. The interesting thing about yours was that you were at 250, which is decent.
Yeah.
I like seeing it at like 500. I'm sure you might agree with some higher B12 levels being more optimal.
Well, I mean, and doctors are scaring their patients, and it's like, wow, your toxic levels of B12, and we know that's water soluble. And in Europe, I think the ranges are much higher.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon for our patients to have 1492 plus.
Holy cow.
And so for you to be eating so much meat as your main thing and only being at 250 is the point I try to emphasize to a lot of people, is that we've done something to our food, and you're having high quality stuff. I know you sent me some of the, like, it's game meats. It's not just beef and chicken. But that number, I mean, maybe 2 years ago, I would have expected it to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
But I've realized recently, like, B12 doesn't really come from red meat. It's coming from the dirt and the microbes that kind of break down whatever's in there. Right. And then when the cattle, whatever it is eating that, they're converting a lot of it and absorbing it into their muscles. We get it from there.
So theoretically, grass-fed beef will have higher.
Should be better. Something is missing where we're
something's
not getting that anymore. And it's the dirt, the cleanliness of our food and everything like that. Like maybe they're feeding them grass, but they're not pastured. Like maybe they're just giving them heaps of grass or hay
Degradation
and
of
calling.
soils.
Exactly. What are we doing to the soil? Where's the bacteria that should be producing this B12? Because now it's not enough to tell someone who has low B12, like you're in an okay spot, but people drop down to under 100. And you can't just tell them to eat more red meat because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Supplements are kind of taken over because we've done something wrong to the food where we're too clean and
We're reliant on supplementation to get us back to baselines.
exactly.
Which is crazy.
And you're someone who's eating a lot of red meat. That should be the dietary intervention for it. And it's just not. You've been doing it for 8 years.
Would you say there's a potential problem for like levels of absorption, like underproduction production of stomach acid?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the one thing, and this is one case. You make a great point because we need the acid to convert. There's other factors.
Every patient that leaves here takes betaine, hydrochloric acid.
That's the first thing I recommend to people.
And
Maybe
it's
I shouldn't be
interesting.
recommending.
What's that?
I said it's the first thing I recommend to people is digestive enzymes or contain HCl.
Yeah.
It's funny because when they leave the doctor's office, they probably get Tums or.
That's the confusing thing, because I will give people who have reflux, I will give them betaine.
More acid,
And they're like, no, my doctor says you guys are going to blow a hole in my stomach. I'm like, your reflux is going to go away.
Yep. They don't realize that you can get the heartburn both ways, and we keep suppressing it, and then it affects our digestion and it causes other problems.
And then I explain to them why they get the reflux. And why I'm saying they have hypochlorhydria to start off with. It's like, it's a stress response. When you're eating, you're in sympathetic overdrive.
Yeah.
You're eating on the run. You're working at your desk. You're not relaxed. So you're not getting into a parasympathetic state where your body's producing HCl, digestive enzymes, everything's moving. Now it's like there's food in my stomach, and the brain's like, oh, crap, there's food. Send some acid. So it's almost like a delayed reaction, and that's when you start getting this bad combination. Plus the makeup of whatever people are eating. It's like you probably can't digest half that stuff anyways.
Yep. Which I think the value of a lot of European cultures is that eating is almost
a religious experience.
Yeah, like you're sitting at a table for 3 hours. I mean, we would look at it and say this probably isn't the best food to be eating, but they don't seem to have as much of a problem with this. Maybe I think part of it is the soils, and the food that they're eating is cleaner and healthier and better. But I think it's also they're just digesting, and I don't think we're. I
the
always,
vacation effect. I tell people on vacation you could eat anything.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you there. But because I laugh at like the gym culture is obviously all about protein shakes, and I say that it's like you're downing a protein shake in 30 seconds after you've wadded for 20 minutes, you've been going around in circuits for 20 minutes, you down this protein shake, you're gonna hit the road in 5 minutes, like you're not even gonna digest anything. You just
but that's the state of mind people are in. They have this high efficiency, go ultra, like I gotta accomplish something else. And these are high achieving, high driving people. They burn out.
Yeah.
And they don't get the yields they're looking for because at some point, like the body's like, you're mistreating this machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a top-down approach that needs to change, but we have this mentality of stress, money, die. I don't know what's in between. We don't take time for ourselves.
I mean, people think very much on a 1 or a 0, an all or nothing state. They don't see things as a spectrum where it's like, well, because there's a fear of like falling off. It's like you kind of like it's a rat race. You got to be with the lead pack. It's like, but if you just change how you do things, you actually you can thrive so much more in every way, not just like health, not just health. Okay, it could be financial, it could be personal achievement, whatever it is. Like, but you get fixated on like I got to keep up. You actually are limiting yourself because you're like now you're just going with what everyone else is doing. Maybe everyone else is so behind.
Or it's social media kind of half-truths.
Yeah.
And you compare.
Yeah, the empty promises. It's like, if I do this, I'll be where I want to be. And it's like, well, that carrot is still on that stick ahead of you. Yeah.
Any other pieces of the blood work you wanted to... Was there anything else?
I think those were the big topics. Yeah.
Is that also a stress response? Like, I guess, to Jason's point, I guess even stress would suppress the stomach acid. or just the ability for the stomach to digest properly.
It's usually the other big piece. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
it's not coming from the food, it could be an absorption issue through the stomach acid.
Right.
If you're eating a lot of protein, your stomach acid should be there because you need it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd feel way worse. So it could be a bit of both, but I really think a lot of this should be coming from the food and just isn't anymore.
Isn't what it once was.
Yeah, need to eat some more dirt.
Which is crazy. Because again, with everything we've gone over, and even like the hand sanitizer, like the constant sanitization, the cleanliness, like just this. I feel like these last 2 years, not to go there, but it's the domino that's been pushed down is gonna affect things for years to come. And I don't think we're gonna be. Our health system is already a shit show. What it's gonna become if we don't start putting more emphasis on people's diets, and I don't just mean telling people to limit red meat consumption. I mean fixing things from the ground up. We're gonna have big problems in 15 to 20 years.
I mean,
if not sooner.
We're already seeing. My pediatrician has already warned us that it's going to be a bad cold and flu season because no one's seen it for 2 years.
Yeah.
So when it hits, it's going to hit hard.
And it's hitting on all levels. It's hitting on the fertility piece. It's hitting on the health piece. Like I thought I read a stat. This was in the States, but 87% of Americans are metabolically dysfunctional. 87%.
That's a lot.
That is a high number. Like that is.
I don't even think people care.
Unfortunately, because they still want their McDonald's. Uber Eats is still thriving. I joke, DoorDash is thriving. People are still going to these places. The last 2 years, there's been a huge influx of fast food that people continuously consume. So even though like we talked about the damaging sides of sugars and just kind of the misperceptions about red meat and whatnot, but like people almost give a free pass to the fast. Everyone goes after McDonald's, but Starbucks is just as bad. Tim Hortons is just as bad. Like it's all processed garbage that people continuously consume, and to me it shouldn't take much to start cutting back in an individual's diet. And I understand the convenience of me driving to Tim Hortons.
Well, I think that's really the boiling down point. It's like it's just convenience. People don't spend time buying food, preparing food, picking out good food, picking out good recipes. Like, it's just like I just gotta eat something.
Well, I call this the Amazon and the Netflix effect, but we've gotten, it's almost over convenience. And I think our biggest issue is abundance. We have too many choices, which is causing way more problems. We don't have the willingness to go to the store anymore to pick out food. We want it just brought to us. We're choosing the easier route at a premium. We're paying more for it, but we'd rather that.
I think people have to go small world, like get a local butcher, do your own, go to like farmers markets, like actually do these things that are like kind of like, people are like, it's lame. I don't do that. I can order on my phone and the food is delivered at my front door. Like maybe we have to change that level of care and attention.
It's funny with the delivery piece is that like you're home hungry, you order something, it's going to take 45 minutes to come. Could have made something in the same time. Maybe if you like exercised in that time, that would be a good offset piece.
Right. That's a good idea.
It's just a funny thing that we have. I mean, it's weird.
Like, I get the balance element. I think we all have to, we all want to, enjoy ourselves from time to time. I'm not saying to completely, push all this aside, but I think there should be more of a push, I think, from a governmental level, from a public health level, to try to get some of this better information out there, just to give people more incentive to feel healthy. I don't think it's asking for much. Like this is the best vehicle. This is the only vehicle you're guaranteed. So you may as well try to treat it the best you can. And I really don't think people know what feeling good really feels like because their baselines are so low.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone's tired.
Yeah.
So lying down feels good.
Yeah.
It's easy. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, and I mean, I see this all the time, and I think the buy-in has to be not just for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks. It's to circle to that original point. It's a lifestyle. It's a commitment. You need to change a little bit of everything. And while that seems overwhelming, it just becomes that domino that falls. It's like you start sleeping more.
You need to have reinforcing groups. Like I think you need to have a gym or a trainer. You need to have a naturopath. You need to have like a team that it's accountability. And you adopt that culture, and maybe you need to have a circle of friends that encourage it in you, and someone that's going to be honest with you, like having takeout again. Imagine saying that to someone that I think it's almost a hate crime to say something like that. It's like, just be honest.
Shame
It's like,
someone like
2022, it's a hate crime, bro. Be careful.
but if you had real friends, they'll
Yes.
tell you.
Yes.
They're like, hey, here, I brought a salad. Have some with me.
As my friend says, they're frequency boosts. Things that boost your frequencies. Going for a hike, ditching your phone for a day.
Oh, this is
Clean.
getting into deep stuff
Yeah,
now.
a little bit.
This is really good. Any final thoughts?
I think we covered everything that I really wanted to go over, and I enjoyed this very much.
I'm glad. It was wonderful. You guys had a good synergy. And
That was good.
Anthony, thanks for having high cholesterol.
Yeah,
Thanks for bringing the topic.
thank you.
Thanks for being a pioneer.
I won't go that far. I'm
You know, you eat like a pioneer, I mean.
I think I actually eat more like a pioneer.
That's what I'm
think
saying. It's a
so.
double entendre.
You know, not to take too long. There was a book I read recently. It was
How to
essentially
Churn Butter.
the history of physical culture. It was a really good. I think you'd get a lot out of the book.
I hate
But
reading.
okay. I'll have to give you Cole's notes. But it's essentially the history of bodybuilding and just where we're at today. So it stemmed from the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Eugene Sandow's, Vince Gironda's, and then into the Arnold Schwarzenegger years, and just how physical culture and bodybuilding and everything kind of came to be. And you look at their diet in the 20s and 30s and what they were preaching. It was steak, eggs, raw milk, and liver. Now, the organ piece is really difficult for me, but like these are all the basics that these guys were preaching. And what am I sitting here saying today? And these guys were physical specimens. Like they were chiseled. Like
Before steroids.
yeah, there was no inflammation. There was none of this hanging shit. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, a good book is my take.
Maria,
on it.
I wanted to watch. I like Pump and Iron.
Amazing
And she
movie.
likes part 2 because it's the women centric one. And it's dated, but I think the dudes look much better back then.
Yes, they did.
Now they're like horses,
They look like
and they're
different
unhealthy.
shape.
Like Arnold's still kept up. He's old, but he's still
Yeah.
like
Still
looks
looks
like
okay.
he can still lift.
Yeah.
Ronnie's
Yeah, he-
done. Ronnie looks like Darth Vader. To put him back together with pieces.
But honestly, I respect the hell out of him for he
course.
keeps going. He just
He doesn't,
he's in
there's
all
no,
kinds
he
of
doesn't know what
pain.
else to do.
Yeah, he just goes
He
to the
answers the
gym.
phone like this.
shows up in a wheelchair to the squat rack and
Yeah.
then just does it.
So crazy. I'm going to edit the crap out of this because we had so many interruptions, but it was a
it's all good.
pleasure.
That was good, man.
And we're going to do this again.
Yeah,
Time?
love to.
I'll be on time next time.
Imagine
Bold
if
it. Put it in bold.
you just missed the one,
Yeah,
the
we'll only do
11:30
the
instead of
double-digit
1:30.
ones.
Can't
Yeah, I'm going to use military time from now on. Okay, we're out of here.